Welcome everybody to Just Keep Parenting. Thank you for joining us today. We are going to talk about the irritation points with school-age children, so 6 to 11-year-olds. We've been talking about infants, then we talked about toddlers, we've talked about preschoolers, and now we're going to talk about school-age years, right? Because all ages and stages have irritation points. And if we can understand those irritation points, then it helps us be better caregivers of children, whether it's being a teacher or a parent. But if we can remind ourselves, oh yeah, that's right, this is part of this age and stage, right? So last time I showed a book when we were talking about the preschoolers, I showed a book that is Caring for Your School-Age Child, ages 5 to 12. And it's put out by the American Academy of Pediatrics, and you can find them at healthychildren.org. And so I love to look it up on in the book as well as online, and it always just reminds me, that's right, this is normal, this is typical for these kids, right? And that's what we're referring to as the irritation points. So what do we know about 6 to 11-year-olds? We know that they're capable of classifying objects and events, right, where the other kids haven't been able to do that very well. They also have language to express those classifications, right? And because of this language, they have awareness, their awareness of themselves and relationships to others is heightened, right? And so they compare, they compete, they focus on their peers and form relationships that's based on that perceived similarity, right? Whereas in preschool, right, they just play with whoever, they start to kind of feel it out, right? And in kindergarten, we see a little bit more of that. And so now, we didn't do a lot of competing before because we couldn't handle it emotionally. But now these kids are to a point where they can start to handle that competition, that comparing, right? So they look at themselves in accordance with those perceived similarities, right? So they cement their gender roles and strive to match cultural norms, right, during this stage, right? I don't really want to wear those clothes, right? That starts to be important to them because maybe their friends are not wearing those kinds of clothes or doing their hair that way, right? They realize that they have more in common with children than adults. So the value that they place on their friendship, right, increases, it goes up, right? So these kiddos, they also become more logical, right? Even though it's a slow start and we think, is it ever going to come, right? But they're more apt to argue. They're more apt to analyze rules and view situations as unjust, right? Because of their language and their cognitive skills. So they reason, they protest, right? Which is why a lot of parents are pushed to do that. Because I said so. Right? Just do it. I don't know. Just do it because I said so, right? But that's because this age group is starting, right, to debate a little bit. They've got the skills in order to do that. Around the age of 7, they become better at evaluating their own performance and eager to master new skills, right? Up to age 7, it's like, I'm good at everything. I've got that ego, right? That's part of who they should be. But as they slip into the age of 7, they're like, oh yeah, you can do that really good, but I can do this really good, right? So they want to master new skills and they're evaluating themselves. They're also highly critical of themselves, right? So repeated failures to create risks, it affects their self-esteem, right? And so as we want to have that age group of kids try new things, right? That's why we do it. We want them to try new things. We don't want them to have repeated failures so that starts to affect their self-esteem. 4-year-old children like to try anything, right? Give it to me. I got an ego. Let's do it. But this age will start to shy away from those possible failures. Oh, I don't know that I'm any good at that, right? They're starting to compare. They've seen other kids that are good at it and they don't know if they're good at it, right? So they start to say things like, no, sports are stupid, or playing the piano is stupid, right? In order to cover up for that potential failure. So we hear a lot of that negativity coming out in them, 7 and 8-year-olds, because of that. They're trying to cover up for themselves. So they are more self-aware of themselves than of others because they can start to do the comparing. They study people and they gather information, right? They just amass that information. They fixate on people and that they admire, right? And can do impersonations of relatives. So sometimes it's kind of humorous to watch this age group because they're fixated, because they're observing. They can pretty much act like we act sometimes. So as far as developmentally, right, they start to increase in the things that they can start to think about, right? They learn the skills that they perceive that will help them most as an adult, right? So this is when they start to thinking about, what do I really want to do when I grow up, right? Some choose reading, writing, and math, while others choose manipulations, conning others, stealing, fighting, right? This age group needs to learn that they're capable. I am capable. So they must learn about the rules and consequences when we break the rules. They test their own ideas, right, and values to see if they can still be loved, right? So they're always spouting out things, right? I hate you. That's because they're trying to test their values. Are you still going to love me if I say mean things, right? They grapple with the concept of responsibility, right? And they want to strengthen that internal control. But that's hard for them at this age group. They're starting, but they're still grappling with it. And so these tasks that we've been talking about all require trial and error. So it's in this, let me just read this page to you. It makes a little bit more sense here. Each one of these many tasks requires trial and error. For the truth is that in order to learn to listen, children must learn the consequences of not listening. In order to learn from mistakes, they must make them. In order to develop cooperation, they must sometimes be resistant. These skills slowly become more and more refined between the ages of 6 and 12. Some children reach adulthood and still working on these tasks, right? So they have to be refined, right, through this process of trial and error. So let's talk about the irritation points that we sometimes see with this age group, right? They resist our directions. That's the first one, right? Why should I? I don't have to. They become moody. They become withdrawn. It's not fair is something that we hear a lot from this age group, right? But with reminders, they'll complete the task, right? They just don't want to. About age 8, they start to, they'll obey, but they kind of walk off, mumble things you can't decipher, right? 9 and 10-year-old kids tend to worry and complain and make excuses, right? And usually they're physical excuses. I'm too tired. Oh, my leg hurts. I didn't get enough sleep last night, right? So we hear that complaining from that age group. The second one is they bicker with their siblings and their friends. We see a lot of relationship things happening during this age, right? At age 6, they tend to criticize their friends. Name calling and fighting are often heard there. At age 7, they start to withdraw from the struggle. They won't fight. They won't quit. They just walk away, right? They're concerned with themselves and how they're treated, right? And so they need extra encouragement at this age. When their squabbling intensifies, right? We need to read this as a signal for more parent or teacher attention, right? I need more time with you. And so this is how I'm showing it. By age 8, they do much better at two-way relationships. I can figure this out, right? And best friends start to emerge at that point. Sometimes my parents are a little bit concerned that they don't have a best friend in preschool or kindergarten. That's because they don't know how. They don't know how to have that skill yet. But by age 8, it's typically there. They also demanding and fighting start to increase a little bit here. Tattling starts to decrease because they want their relationships to go well, right? We hear a lot of tattling in 5, 6, and 7-year-olds, but by 8, they want those relationships to go well. And by 9 and 10, friends become more important to them than their own siblings, right? It's typical. The third thing is they need endless reminders, right? We think that as children grow older, they grow older, that their ability to manage themselves also grows, right? And sometimes they do, right? But sometimes their energy is focused elsewhere, right? They're not our priorities. Their priorities are not our priorities. So that developmental list that they're learning takes a lot of energy, right? So brushing their teeth can seem inconsequential, right? Yeah, I'm brushing my teeth, I'm walking around, I'm forgetting, right? They just do things differently. 7-year-olds get lost in their world and they forget the daily routines, right? 8-year-olds are good starters, but they need freedom in accomplishing the tasks. And they do everything fast when they're 8 and they tire easily, right? At 9, they can accomplish the task, but many times on their own timeline, right? And by 10, when you say the word bath, they comply, although the attitude starts to surface a little bit, right? The next one is they feel unjustly treated, right? The teacher always picks on me. You pay more attention to him than you do to me, right? These are common complaints voiced by this age of children. They're comparing themselves to others, so this is part of their job, remember, right? The best thing that we can do for this group when they feel unjustly treated is to just offer empathy, right? Using that power of acceptance, right? Notice things. Your whole body is slouched down and you seem discouraged, right? Maybe we need some time together. So helping them understand that we can take care of the problem if we can talk about it. The next one is sometimes they're overly sensitive. This age group of children, they hold themselves to high standards, right? They're internalizing so much information that they struggle to live to the expectations that they've put on themselves. They're self-critical, and because of this, they're sensitive to outside criticism. When they say something like, I never do anything right, instead of correcting them, use your best listening skills and say something like, things didn't turn out like you'd hoped, right? And open up that door for a conversation. Sometimes this age group starts to drum their fingers, right? Or bite their nails. So help them, guide them towards more acceptable anxiety-reducing behaviors, right? When kids really say, I don't care, they're really saying, I don't feel cared for. So take time to notice them and join them in pressure-free activities, right? And the last one, my friends, is saying what? I remember my dad said to me, you just need a lesson. What? I always said what? So sometimes, even before we finish our statement, they're saying what, right? The older children are starting to develop inner speech, right? So they have conversations going on outside and inside their heads. The little ones, they don't have that inner speech developed yet. So they're just being squirreled by things, right? But this group, they're starting to have conversations. So they may be having this conversation in their head, and we want them to listen to us, and it takes them a minute, right? The author of the book talks about how she gets on their level and says, oh, there you are, right? When our eyes have met, so that they can be with you because of that inner speech that's going on, right? It's hard for them when they first develop this speech, it is hard for them to listen because they hear themselves and they hear you talking, and it's hard for them to grapple with both of those, right? So we just calmly repeat and remember to disconnect disobedience from disrespect, right? So I forgot, there's one more. It's called bending the truth, right? So they're testing the difference between fact and fantasy. They make up delightful stories. Sometimes parents are like, my child is lying, right? No, they're just making up delightful stories because they're testing out that difference between fact and fiction, right? So if we can do that, right, then knowing those irritation points, we're going to be better able to respond to our kids. So here's the 6 to 11-year-olds. Everybody, thanks for joining us on Just Keep Parenting, and have a great day. Make it a great day.